Hello and welcome to Sports Opinion, the weekly sports talk show on Channel 18. That's public access TV. My name's Dirk Keller. This is my buddy Bob Boyd, and over there's my buddy Bud Supple. And here's everybody's friend Earl Murphy. We're back with a very special guest, Randy Larson, the commissioner of the Men's Basketball Primetime League and the Women's Basketball Game Time League. Randy, welcome back.
Thank you so much. All friends here. Great
That's
people
right.
to be with.
That's right. Now, before we get going on the show, we want to talk a little bit about our friend George Wine. George was the longtime sports information director at the University of Iowa Athletic Department. And we had him on our program, it'd been about a month and a half ago on May 23rd. Mm-hmm. And we all agreed at the end of the show that it was one of the best shows we'd ever done. Certainly the most interesting conversation we'd had in quite a while.
Got your work cut out for you.
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah, we're setting the bar high. Unfortunately, George died the day after the 4th of July. He went in for hip replacement surgery and didn't come out. Had a heart attack. And it was really pretty stunning. For an 81-year-old man, he was the picture of health. He had,
We didn't look his age.
He didn't look his age.
That's what everybody says.
He was trim, and heck, he didn't hardly even have gray hair. And so we were really surprised by it. And we just want to send out our best wishes to his wife, Barry, his son, Steve, who is, I'd forgotten, we didn't talk about him when he was on the show, but Steve is a sports writer for Associated Press down in Miami.
Yes.
And talked to Phil Hattie last week, and Phil wants to come back on the show and talk about George next time. And we've had Phil on the show before, and Lord knows he can fill an hour quickly, but when he's talking about George Wine, I think it's going to be close to the heart and something we all want to hear. We're going to run that George Wine show that we did a month and a half ago in a couple of weeks. If you want to see it now, it's on my Facebook page. You can always find it on PATV.TV right there. Whoops, right there, down there. And the only other thing I wanted to say about George, and you guys chip in whenever you want, we all know he was a loyal Hawkeye fan. He was there virtually for every game since 1955 when he came to school here as a student. He saw the highest highs and the lowest lows, but one of the things that's always struck me about George is how even-keeled he was. He never got too excited over the big wins, and he certainly didn't hang his head when we had a tough loss. You could count on George to be steady as she goes. And I think that's going to be missed around the athletic department.
One of the things I liked so much about him was that, of course, he was congenial. Everybody talks about what a nice guy he was, friendly, would talk to everybody, just a down-to-earth, common-sense type guy. But although he was a huge fan, a homer, if you will, he was honest.
Oh, yeah.
And he'd tell you what he thought about some player or some coach or some strategy. And to be honest and candid and not confrontational or be a jerk about it is you got to be an everyman type guy to do that, and he did that beautifully. And to me, he's one of a kind, cut from the same cloth of that whole generation of Bump Elliott, Tom Davis, Hayden Fry, Dwayne Banks, Dan Gable, guys that if you call them up at 3 o'clock in the morning, they'll show up.
Yeah,
If you need help,
that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Well, George is going to be missed. I know Phil Hattie's going to miss him. I've talked to a number of people who are going to miss him. Tom Kakert enjoyed sitting with he and Phil at the football and basketball games. So
I enjoyed sitting with him at the show.
yeah.
He just talks like he was a grand person.
He really was a gifted writer, and we take that for granted. Hayden Fry knows how good a writer he is. He's written several books for Hayden.
Well, that shows the trust there was that Hayden would turn that over to George, and George took the ball and ran with it. Great book.
Yeah, it really was. And
He didn't forget anything.
No.
He knew everything from the day he come here.
no,
Well, the good news, too, is that he was 81, which I think that age surprised me. I didn't realize he was that old. But he was able to enjoy retirement for about 18 years.
Yeah.
And that's a nice thing.
You got to
he
do that.
retired in, 93?
that sounds right.
Yeah, something like that, 18 or 19 years. But, he was also very active in retirement with, the high porch picnic and the
Well, that's
things
what
that he
makes it
did.
so shocking for his wife, and our thoughts go out to her for sure.
Yeah, really. One thing I'm going to miss personally, he wrote for the official Hawkeye website
Oh,
after every football game and after every basketball game. And I got to tell you guys, before I would prepare a show for Sports Opinion, as I'm getting the script put together, I didn't waste my time with the articles that were written for the Gazette and the Press Citizen. I went to George. I went to his blog, and his insight I thought was very keen and unique. He didn't pull punches. He told it like it was, like Randy said.
yeah.
But he also had that even-handed sense of fairness and could give me a little perspective when I was upset.
And he was a good friend of Al Grady's.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and Al had that gift too, didn't he?
That's right.
Sure did.
Yeah.
Well, and George talked about that on the show
Yeah.
when he was with us. What separated Al from all the other writers was that he was a Hawkeye fan first,
Yeah.
and he didn't care who knew it. I think George maybe could be described as a Hawkeye fan first, but more even-keeled about it.
Yeah.
So-
Great conversationalist.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He'll be missed, George. And Barry and Steve, we're really sorry for your loss. And we'll run that show again in a couple weeks after this current show is over. But we're here to talk with Randy about Randy's got, did you know that Randy has already got 25 seasons under his belt as the commissioner of the Men's Primetime League? That's amazing.
You can stay in a
It's a
job.
high-paying job.
You
too,
can stay in a job a long time when nobody else wants it. Yeah. There's no pay involved and a little bit of work, but it's been a labor
of love.
I remember that first year, somebody interviewed me and said, "How long do you think this will go on?" I said, "Oh, they'll drag me off the sidelines when I got a cane and drooling out of the corner of my mouth." I love doing it, and that probably will be true. This is our 26th year, and it's been fun every minute of it.
Yeah.
Well, let's take a look back 26 years ago. How did the idea come to you?
Well, of course, it didn't come to me. Coach Davis came up to me one day and said the NCAA just passed legislation allowing summer leagues so that the basketball players in the off-season can actually join a league. And I know that you kind of get the guys all together every day to play, because I was fairly young then. I'd just gotten out of Iowa State and come here to law school, and it was 1986. And I've been doing it ever since I got to town, because you need somebody to figure out what gym is available and who can play. And back then, not all of the players on the team stayed like they do now. Some of them went home and some were here. I remember one summer it was Dennis Johnson, Greg Boyle, Ronnie Lester, and I. And of course, me being the weakest player, it was Ronnie and I against those two all summer, and they had no chance. Ronnie would go by his guy, draw my guy, and I'd have a little 10-footer. That was but we were going and playing different places, and Tom says, it's got to be easy to organize a league than it is to 7 days a week you're getting these guys together, and I think it would be fun. I think he understood right away that it would be fun for the players. I don't know that even as prescient as he was, that he would grasp the public relations appeal. The media gets an opportunity to go see the players. The fans get to see the players right there, not 20 rows up. And the attraction and keeping basketball in the news for 6 weeks in the summer, those are benefits that I think have helped keep it going. One thing we've really tried to do is make it good basketball, so it's not just a glorified pickup game. We encourage our coaches to put people on the bench that aren't playing the right way. We keep stats. We have games are on TV. We've got scorekeepers and good referees and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of people that really help with it to make it work right, because around the country, as the leagues have fallen away, what they usually tell me is that the players don't show up or they don't play the right way, and becomes just kind of a ragtag type of affair. And I always tell them, well, that's the advantage we have that you don't have. I've got Iowa kids playing, and Iowa kids like to play the right way. All they need is someone to say at the top, everyone's playing the right way. So you don't have to worry that if you throw the ball in bounds, it's not going to come back to you. You don't have to worry that you're going to be the only guy back on defense, or your guys aren't going to screen out. Everyone tries to do it the right way, and I think that's why the coaches have embraced it, is that it's been at least not developing a lot of new bad habits. That we're certainly not coaching the way they coach. We're not as good as they are, and we don't have practices. We don't have the same system. But I think there is an emphasis on trying to make it as good a basketball as we can. And I cringe once in a while when you see a media account that says, oh, it's summer basketball league, nobody plays any defense. I think if you go out there and look at the sweat and the effort, you'd think differently.
Well, 26 years ago, you played those games in the Iowa City West High gym.
City High first.
Oh, City High the first
We
year?
played in both gyms. We had 12 teams that first year, and that first year was fun because, as it turns out, you look back and you go, okay, Greg McDermott's on a team.
Wow.
Roy Marble's on a team. B.J. Armstrong's on a team. Brad Lohaus, Les Jepson. I mean, famous players in Hawkeye history. We're all out there playing, and back then you could only have one college player per team. So if you have a 15-man squad, you got 12 players that are not graduating. You got to have 12 teams. So as years have gone by, the NCAA changed that rule to make it 2 players per team, so we could lower the teams. And of course, the fewer teams you have, the more the talent is consolidated, and the better the games are. So we're now down to 4 teams. We've got 8 Hawkeyes, a bunch of future Hawkeyes, 5 of them, and then some ex-Hawkeyes. So right now, in our 4-team league, we typically have 4 or 5 Hawkeyes on each team. So it's really fun for the fans. They enjoy seeing people that they recognize, that they want to kind of see how they're doing. And that's the storyline, is the Hawkeyes, and particularly the future Hawkeyes. And that's been the same from the beginning. Everybody wants to see, what are the incoming freshmen? Can they really play, or are they just press clippings?
And we're going to get to them in a little bit, but I still want to dwell a little bit on those first years. You played at City High and West High.
Yeah.
How many years did you play there?
You know, I'm not sure. I think
10?
we've been at North Liberty about 14 years. And so between the two, we were there 12. I think we were at City High maybe 8 years, and West High 4 years, something like that. And we very much appreciated their letting us use the facilities. The demand for gyms wasn't quite what it is nowadays back then, but we also had high school kids in the league, and so there was some justification that way. And it was really a difficult experience when it was 100 degrees out, because it was hot on that inside, and just keeping the floor dry so that the players didn't get injured. I'll never forget Kevin Skillett's brother, Jeff, was a kicker and a very good basketball player, and he played 1 year, and he broke his leg slipping on a wet spot going up for a layup, and that was the only terribly serious injury we've ever had. And we wouldn't have had that one if not for the humidity and the difficulty.
Did you hear from Hayden Fry on that one?
Well, he was done. He was done. He would never have let him play if he wasn't graduated senior. But back then had towel boys. We'd have 4 towel boys every night come in and just run out and clean the floor off. Every trip they'd have to do it. But I remember some great days. I remember once when Ricky Davis was a 9th grader, just played his 9th grade year. I was guarding him.
9th grade.
I turned my head, and he went back door, and somebody threw him a lob, and he caught it at about 12 feet and threw it down. And I turned around and said, "There's an NBA player." And of course, it was only 4 years later he was an NBA player.
Yeah.
A 9th grader.
We only had him for 1 year at Iowa, didn't we?
Yep.
We've had a few that played as 9th graders. Matt Gaines, of course, the most recent, but Jeff Settles did, Ryan Bowen did, Ricky Davis. So there are certain guys that not only have the ability to fit in, but they want to. Now, this is a commentary, I think, on young athletes nowadays. They don't want any part of it because they don't want to play against people that might embarrass them. They don't want to try to match up against a senior in college and then maybe have a recruiter see it and say, oh, gosh, maybe he's not a top 20 recruit. So we don't get them anymore, and it's just the fact that they do some traveling, and they'd rather play in Las Vegas and do those kinds of AAU things, which I personally think is a much lesser quality of basketball because they're playing 3 games a day. There's the coaching is non-existent, and I just think it's a different experience. But that's been one of the changes over the years.
Well, that's interesting. 25 years and counting, 26th year of the Primetime League. Now, you've been out at North Liberty, you say, about 14 years. I didn't even realize the rec center had been there that long.
Well, we've had game time for 12 years, and that's the women's league, which was occasioned by the fact that they went to 2 players per team. Before that, if you had 8 returning Iowa players, you couldn't find 80 girls that could compete with them. And so they were better off playing amongst themselves. Once we got to where we could have 2 per team, and we could have 6 or 4 teams, now you can find 40 or 60 Division I level women in Eastern Iowa to give them good competitive games. And so it's been longer than 12 because they never played anywhere but North Liberty. So that's why I think it's been about 13, 14 years at North Liberty.
And major advantage, that's air conditioned. Right?
Yes. Yes.
Randy, you've seen them all play for 26 years. Can you give us a 5 against 5, the 5 of the best, 5 against the
I sure could.
Okay.
You know, in recent years, there was no one that was more effective than Greg Bruner, and that's why he's making millions of dollars now playing in Europe, because he wanted to dominate every game.
Is that right?
Okay? Matt Gaines, closest thing to him. I always said that Matt Gaines had 4 qualities that were unusual in a young player. He was a great shooter, which we've seen later in his career.
Yeah.
He was a great scorer. He'd go inside, he'd play post, he'd play outside, he'd get out on the break, he'd get on the boards, he could score every way there was.
All of us watch him think.
Yep. He always played the game the right way, which is very unusual for a shooter,
Oh, yes.
let alone a scorer. But most importantly, he wanted to kill you every trip down. And you don't get that.
Yeah.
The guys that want to play the right way sometimes are a little, calm. Matt had that fire. And of course, he gets it from Mike and Julie. And he's always had that fire. So Bruner and Gatens, I would say, are 2 of the guys that have been just extraordinary in recent years. Going back before that a little bit, Ryan Bowen and Jeff Settles, tremendous players.
Yeah.
And then Jeff Horner. Was really a good player.
Oh, yes.
Really a good player because he could really shoot. And once he got away from Coach Alford and always worrying about whether Steve was going to second guess his shots, he was a very effective long range shooter, just a tremendous shooter and a great passer. Now, prior to that, back in the old days, you don't have to look any further than that team of B.J. Armstrong, Roy Marble, Kevin Gamble, Brad Lohaus. Bill Jones. Bill Jones is a tremendous talent in primetime
Yes.
because he could play every position.
Yeah.
And at 6'7", he stole 5 or 6 passes a game. So those are the kind of guys. And then maybe my personal favorite that I hardly ever hear people talk about anymore, Jeff Moe.
Is that right?
Jeff Moe was so fun.
He could hit.
And although he wasn't a great defensive player, he was a hard-working defensive player. He'd give you all he had.
Yeah.
And then he'd sneak out and get that layup. So I'll always have a warm spot in my heart for Jeff Moe and just the way he played that infectious. I think when you have fun, you play more confidently. And fun and confidence are 2 things that really can make you effective. You can play above your ability when you're having fun and playing confidently, and Jeff Moe epitomized that.
What's some of these guys at now? You said that Bruner was making a lot of money playing in Europe. What about some of the other fellows? Do you know, Randy?
Well, I do a little bit about some of them. It's changed a little bit over the years. Kenya Murray, of course, is active in basketball now again, in addition to his full-time job as a salesperson.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of guys that are still playing. There's not as many. We had kind of a drought there where the talent level wasn't as high as it is now. I think you'll see guys now, almost all of them coming in the Iowa program will end up playing. But Duez Henderson and Jason Price have both played primetime for years, and they both played in Europe for many years. Adam Molluska, of course, played a couple of years and then gave it up and is living in Solon, right here locally with his lovely wife and 2 children.
Did you try to tempt him into coming out?
I did. Luke Recker and Adam Molluska are 2 guys that we would love to see play, but Adam with the family and the job, and then Luke with his knees not being so good, we're unable to. And we've always kind of had a rule, we don't ask anybody. I mentioned it to those guys, but in general, we want it to be the people that really want to do it so much that they show up and they go through the effort of applying and all that kind of stuff.
Luke lives in North Liberty, right?
Yes, he does. He lives here and see him quite a bit with his lovely wife.
Yeah.
A guy that I was just thinking, Jared Cole, most recent graduate, just got he paid his dues last year and played in Iceland, which is about as low as you can start, and he just got a great job in the south of France, much more money, much better competition,
Much better
and his game
climate.
has really expanded. I think you'll see Jared Cole can play professionally as long as he wants, and he can put away a nice goose egg if he wants.
That's great. That's great.
How about
Nest egg.
Kenny Arnold? He's got a sickness.
Kenny is hanging in there. He doesn't weigh very much, and he's not terribly active, but he's alive. Living in Chicago, and Mike Henry helps take care of him. Mark Gannon and Bobby Hansen, Lou Olson did some things to raise some funds for him, but he isn't great. It's had a permanent effect on his health, but he's a fighter.
Yeah.
Sure is, or he wouldn't be here now.
That's right.
Now, what about Eddie Horton? What kind of primetime league player was Eddie?
Well, about like you'd expect. You'd have to take him out about 3 times a game and remind him to play hard. But what a congenial, jovial guy. I mean, he could score on anybody. And when he put that rump into you, you weren't going to go over his back and get a rebound. Isn't it funny, though, because Eddie played overseas quite a bit, made some good money, and he came back for the reunion. One of the guys you might wonder if he'd come back, and he came back on his own dime. Kevin Gamble, the guy that came with him, both from the same town there, made a whole bunch of money in the NBA, and he's now coaching with Keno Davis up at Central Michigan and doing well. So those guys, Eddie was one of those guys that if you wanted to go have a beer, he's one of the guys you wanted to go with.
Yeah.
Just a fun guy, great to talk to, and I like Eddie a lot.
Yeah, he's back in Springfield, I know that much.
Hometown.
Yep.
Him and Kevin Gamble,
My
right?
son, Jason, sees him
Yeah.
there at the state capitol quite a bit. They, I guess, work in the same circles.
Chris Kingsbury was a lot of fun to watch.
I
At
bet,
prime
yeah.
time, there was no limit to his range in college. You can imagine what he thought his range was in prime time. And he's now successfully running a string of banks and doing a great job. Married a cheerleader that he met when he was playing in the CBA and got a great life, a bunch of kids.
They're out in Nebraska,
Doing well.
right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I'll be darned.
Lots of good memories.
So what's changed the most? Okay, we've talked about, 26 years ago, you were playing in high school gyms, you had 8, maybe more teams, no air conditioning. What else has changed from when the primetime league began to today? Here we are, 2012. You got 4 teams now.
Well, one of the changes has been it's harder for kids nowadays to play without a system because they're so used to, from a young age, when they're in 5th grade, they're learning plays and running systems in their little AU teams, and they go up through high school. We always used to spend most of our time, even if you were on a basketball team for 3 or 4 months a year, we'd spend another 8 months a year playing motion basketball, Midwest basketball, where you move the ball and cut and pass and set screens and move the ball 5 or 6 times before you take a shot, and they don't know how to do that as much anymore.
Who'd you play for?
Who did I play for?
Yeah.
Well, I mostly sat.
In high school?
I mostly sat.
High school.
I played at Ames High.
Yeah.
George Duvall was our high school coach, and then I played a little bit at Iowa State as a walk-on, and
Yeah.
Lynn Nance was my coach, and I thought the world of him. And one of the things that's fun about primetime is letting them find out. If you just move the ball 8 times, and if you set some screens and do some things away from the ball, that's enough of a system. And one of the guys that runs that system about 70, 80% of the time? Fran McCaffrey. He believes in old-style motion basketball.
Yeah.
And when they're not running a set play, or when they're not running their kind of set offense, they often just say, just play. Just play.
Yeah.
Set some screens, move without the ball, share the basketball, hit the open guy, go inside out, move the ball from side to side. And there's still people like Bill Self and Fran McCaffrey that just believe the more you guys can learn that basketball IQ, the more effective you can be as a team. Because let's face it, if you run a play, it's going to work once or twice, and then the defense knows the play. And you might have a counter to the play, but they'll learn that too. If you want to score in the 4th quarter, you better have guys that just know how to play.
Well, one of them getting a pretty good salary at this now, but not quite as much as you thought he should get.
You're talking about the new contract for Coach McCaffrey? Well, I have to tell you, this money is, of course, out of the athletic department, and I think they got a steal. And I
Agreed.
think that's a great credit to him, because when you look at what Nebraska's paying, and you look at what the Big Ten coaches are paying.
What is Nebraska paying? Their new coach.
Well, I think he gets $2 million.
Right.
And he had not near the resume, and we'll see what kind of job he does. But Nebraska's got plenty of money, and they needed to pay because it's
Oh,
not
yeah.
thought of as the kind of tradition we have here.
Yeah.
But I think Fran McCaffrey could have got more, can get more, and just said, that's
will
not
get
what I'm
more.
about.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm
right.
about. I want the incentives. I want long-term. I want to be here. I want to be a Hawk. I'm not holding anybody up for top dollar. I think that's just how he negotiates, because, they got lawyers that do all this stuff now and agents. But I think Fran McCaffrey's saying, I'm not taking advantage of anybody. I know you want me. We've done a great job. But wait till you see the job we're going to do.
Yes.
I'm not worried about the money.
When the wins come, more money will come.
Yeah.
I don't even think he cares about it.
Yeah, no, I don't think so
it's
either,
his,
but-
I don't think it's his God
But
at
he'll
all.
be rewarded, Randy.
I think what he wants to be known as is somebody that put Iowa basketball back where it ought to be. And he's done that already, and he's going to do nothing but better in the future. And I so much believe in his work ethic, but also the way he coaches. If you go to a practice, which I do as often as I can, he is not ever out of control. He holds them accountable for what they do. He teaches them. I can't tell you how many times I've heard him say to Gabe Olaseni, Gabe, you got so much to learn, but you're really coming on fast. You're learning everything. You're trying. Keep learning. Stick with us.
Yeah.
And that kind of encouragement from your head coach is so much more effective than saying, are you ever going to learn? What's the matter with you? Why can't you figure this out?
Yeah.
Which is what most coaches do, frankly. And I just believe so much in his manner, his relationship with his players, his belief in old-style basketball, and, defensive rebounding and talking and sharing the ball. Those are things that aren't just old-fashioned virtues. Those are modern virtues, and he's brought that modern basketball blended with those old-fashioned virtues in a way that makes them exciting. They play hard, they run, they score. and yet they're obeying the old tenets of John Wooden basketball.
And I think he shares a lot of similarities with Coach Tom Davis.
Oh, no question.
He's a positive reinforcement kind of guy. The style of play is up and down. I don't know if anyone will ever have the style that Tom Davis did again, but
Well, I think they share personal characteristics in
Yeah.
that no one is a more dogged competitor than Coach Davis. I mean, if you play golf with him, you know he never gives up. He grinds every shot. And he was out wearing the basketball court. We've kind of got this image of him as being the great gentleman because he is. But he was a fiery competitor, and he'd let you know about in practice. I remember one day I used to watch a lot of his practices. Just Settles flew in for 25 feet and got a rebound. And Coach Davis just goes crazy. He just says, 9 guys standing around, and Just Settles the only guy that gets his butt in there, half a rebound and just getting in there and getting after it. And he's making a fool of the rest of you guys. Can't jump, can't run. He's in there grabbing the ball. What's wrong with the rest of you guys? And you got to have that fire.
Sure.
You got to have that fire in sports. You can't go out there and just punch a clock on the basketball floor.
we had Dr. Tom on the show earlier this year, and it was just a treat to have him.
We're pretty mild-mannered, calm, gentlemanly, nice words for everything. But I can tell you from personal experience, you don't want to disappoint him about something that's important because he'll let you know about it, and that's just
As
part
he
of that.
should.
That's just part of that accountability. Yeah. He would take guys out for a mistake, and he'd sit them down, and a minute later he'd put them back in. He's telling them 2 things. He's telling them, we got to hold you accountable. If you don't guard your guy, if you don't screen out your guy, you're going to come out. And then by putting him back in a minute, he says, but I believe in you. I know you can do better. Go show me. And that's something McCaffrey has. You'll see him just all up and down on a guy, and then you see that guy go out a minute later and get after it.
Now, we talked about Tom Davis. Have you been on the golf course with him this year?
Oh, yes. Yes, quite a bit.
How's his game?
Excellent, excellent. He shoots his age now and again. He's 72, I think.
Can he putt?
That's amazing.
Yeah.
He is a great putter. He works at it. He lives out there on the golf course, and he's just devoted to his wife, Sherry, and he doesn't leave the house very much other than for events and so forth. He does a lot of charitable work and speaking, but on a day when she's doing art or otherwise busy, he'll just go up the putting green and putt for an hour. Just putt for an hour. He loves to practice. He loves to get better. He's a vastly better golfer than he was 20 years ago.
Is he?
Because back then, he was devoted to basketball. He just didn't put the work
More
into
time,
it.
yeah.
But yes, he's one of the top 3 or 4 seniors in our city, probably one of the top 15 or 20 golfers in our city of any age.
Yeah.
So that's pretty good at 72.
That's real good.
What'd you say his handicap was?
Oh, I would say he's probably a 3 or a 4 or something like that.
Good, yeah.
Wow.
I'd hate to have him play it higher than that.
Yeah.
We went up and played in a benefit for a good friend that we used to go out to Palm Springs and play golf with, and he died recently of Alzheimer's, and we did a little benefit for his wife up at Hunter's Ridge, and it was Jimmy Miller and I and Bump Elliott and Tom, and we won the tournament. And that's 4 guys that this wasn't a senior tournament. That's 4 guys that are all over 50, and he was a big part of it. He's the best putter in every group he's in, I'd say.
Wow.
Wow.
Well, now, we talked about some of the first players and first events of the Primetime League. What about some of the first sponsors? Who were they? Who stepped up and helped you?
That's been one of the things that's made it possible to do it is many leagues around the country that call for advice or setting up a league, they're trying to figure out how can we do this? And, there's NCAA rules about revenue. We can't charge admission. We can't charge television rights fees. Very limited ways to raise money. And basically these businesses are paying, right now it's about $1,400 a piece to get their name on the back of the uniform, their name in the paper once in a while for the box scores, maybe some news coverage. And the program we hand out 5,000 programs a year, but that's all they're getting. So I always tell the players the first night, no sponsor is doing this for the advertising. They're doing it to help the program. They're doing it to help young basketball players. They're doing it to add a community activity that's fun for the fans and especially senior citizens that like to come and sit and watch. And so I remember Dan Aaron's Concrete was one of the first sponsors. Hy-Vee's been a sponsor for many years, but most of them are mom and pop businesses that just get their name on a team, and they do it because they want to contribute to the Hawks in a different way and in a way that allows them to kind of take some ownership in something that they believe in. And so very grateful to all those sponsors. I've never had to work very hard to get them. They just call up and volunteer.
This year you've got Vinton Merchants. Vinton, Iowa Merchants.
Vinton is a bunch of guys that are Hawkeye fans that own stores in Vinton. They want to encourage a little tourism. they're not getting much out of this,
Right.
and they want to help the Hawks.
Isn't that great?
Yeah,
Mike Gatens, has he been there since day one?
pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, long before Matt was even out of diapers.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Jill Armstrong, Skogman Realty. That's
Jill Armstrong's been with 3 realty companies in her career. She's been a sponsor with all of them, and Dan Aaron's coaches in that men's league, and that's her partner. She doesn't need to advertise. She's
No.
got more clients than anybody, but
Yeah.
again, just help.
Culver's.
Ron Novy, been a coach in prime time for 24 years. So he's the owner of Culver's, just opening a new one in Iowa City, and so we're excited to see
Where
that
they
happen.
opening? Yeah.
They're opening up on Highway 1, South Iowa City,
Oh, okay.
I didn't know
just
that.
building it.
What's it by?
I'm not sure the exact spot.
I'll be darned.
I didn't know that.
I didn't either.
Oh, darn. Iowa City Ready Mix.
Well, that was Earl Yoder. You're talking about a great guy.
yeah.
Dwayne Tack now continuing it on, but Earl Yoder's one of those guys that you didn't have to ask Earl for anything. He just said yes. He didn't have no in his vocabulary.
Was he there for you from day one?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
day one.
Iowa City Ready Mix.
Yeah.
LL Pelling Company.
Well, those are some clients of mine, Mr. Finnegan, and they've been really good to us. They're one of the companies that everybody knows about asphalt, and they've been with us loyally. They're in North Liberty, so it's kind of a community thing for them. And,
That's Kevin Lehman's team.
I know.
And then McCurry.
well, Dave McCurry, I bought the airliner from 20
Yeah.
years ago or so, and he's been a friend for 30 years, and he and his wife were the heirs to the Holden Seed Corn
Right,
Company. His
yeah.
wife was a Holden, and so, as he puts it, he can afford to throw away a little money.
You know, brief
That's
little
for
story
sure.
about him. He and I go way back to the days when I was living with Tommy
Sure.
Norman and
Steve
yeah.
Waite.
Steve Waiter and Craftsison and
Eric
all that.
Blaine.
And Dave McCurry, each time one of us moved out of this apartment, and I didn't know him from Adam, except he was somebody that would come over and visit, hang out, along with Steve Bergman. Whenever somebody was moving, Dave McCurry was the first to volunteer to help you move the heavy stuff. And
That was before he was rich.
yeah,
He's been a good guy all his life.
yeah, but that's the kind of guy he was.
Yeah.
I just
Well, didn't he play football for Iowa State? Did you know
Absolutely.
him back
Two-way
then?
starter. Two-way starter.
Is that right?
Played in the NFL for 3 years,
Yeah.
New England and
I don't know. I
Miami.
knew that.
Yep.
I'll be darned.
He was the fastest guy they had back then, so he played both ways and was all conference. What a great group of guys back then. Barry Hill, George Amundsen, Matt Blair. Those are the guys that got me in basketball games on the university campus when I was growing up. And lifelong friends.
Yep.
I'll be
Were
darned.
you a gym rat?
Every day. Every day.
This guy is
I was
the
30
epitome.
I was 30 years old before I ever went 2 days in a row without playing.
Is that
30 years
right?
old.
Oh, God.
I didn't have the
that
talent,
right?
but I had a love for the game. And,
Wow.
Must have been really
So-
sick that day.
Yeah. No, I got the wrong girlfriend. She made me go on vacation and I couldn't find a way to play. So
Okay, truth comes out. Let's talk about the Game Time League, which is the women's summer basketball league. Did Lisa Bluter come to you right away and say we have the rule change? And let's get something going.
we talked about doing one, and we just kind of added up the Division I level players in the area. We just always thought that there just weren't enough. And when it became possible to have half as many teams and get all the Hawkeyes in there, immediately it became something they wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, every person involved with Game Time, from the scorekeepers, which are the same ones as prime time, the refs, the coaches, the fans, all will say that's more fun. Because they are so appreciative. They have just as much ambition, just as much dedication, but you'll see more smiles on the basketball court in Game Time than you do in a month of prime time. It's less of a business. They love doing it, and they have that collaborative feel for the games. When Morgan Johnson gets a screen that gets her open, puts a basket in, she thanks the passer. She thanks the screener.
Yeah, okay.
She's smiling all the way down the court. And as we say on the menu at Bob's Your Uncle, we've got a pizza named after Jenny Lillis. I said, whenever I see that name, I think of how much joy the players that play for Lisa Bluter have when they play. It's something they cultivate. It's something that's a little more natural maybe for the women, but it's something that Lisa really cultivates and recruits people that love to play, love to have their teammates succeed, and that shows in the women's game. They really play old-style basketball more naturally than the men do.
I agree.
How's the attendance for the women?
Well, there's not quite a full house, but it is always well attended.
Good.
There are certain Hawkeyes that make it out there, and as I tell the players the first night, these are the backbone of the support of the program. These are the people that go to every game. These are the people that bring their neighbors to the games, buy season tickets. These are the people that love you. And you don't get to see them at the games, but here, our girls go sit down with them, talk to them, find out who their grandkids are, and that's a fun part of the league, is that relationship that you can have with the players in that intimate setting.
Now, the Game Time League plays, let's see here, Wednesdays and Mondays,
From
correct?
here on out, we play every Monday and Wednesday.
Okay.
We're going Wednesday tonight, then we go next Monday, then the next Wednesday, and then the playoffs start. We go Monday, Wednesday for them. So every Monday and Wednesday from now until the 25th, you can come see us play.
Games are at 6 o'clock and then 7:30.
Yep, just one game at a time.
Good. And you've got virtually all of the current Hawkeye women's players.
Well, all the healthy ones.
Right.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, of course,
That's
we've got
not many.
Melissa Dixon and Catherine Reynolds and Jamie Prenti, and of course, we've lost
was Jamie?
Virginia Johnson and Jade. Just are unable to play. Their careers are over. But the ones we have are certainly exciting. Tiara Taylor, we haven't really seen her full speed, and she's now full speed. Morgan Johnson's playing. Bethany Doolittle, Tricia Nesbitt. We've really got a great crop of incoming players, but it's also great to see these returning, these seniors to be like Morgan Johnson.
Tell us about
Yeah.
Callie Pascal and Kayla Timmerman.
Well, Callie Peschel's the best player of the incoming players. She was probably the best player in Minnesota last year. Kayla Timmerman is also from Minnesota. She's a power forward that can shoot the three, big body, strong girl, a very good shooter. Callie Peschel will remind you of Johanna Solverson.
Oh, good.
She's that size. She runs like a deer. She can shoot the three. She's a high energy player. She's still wearing a knee brace. She's just getting over her surgery, but she's full speed, and I predict that she'll be the starting power forward for the Hawks as a freshman.
You're going to need one.
Well, they don't have one. Kelly Craig and, of course, Virginia Johnson down and Jade Rogers. Kayla Timmerman can play it. Bethany Doolittle, who's been a backup center behind Morgan Johnson, which is no embarrassment to be a backup to a all Big Ten center. She could play some four, and they could go with four guards. They've got great perimeter people. You know, Samantha Logic, Jamie Prenti, Tiara Taylor, and Melissa Dixon.
You named Pretty. Is she going to play?
She is going to play, I think. They envision her being ready for practice in November.
Okay.
Now, she'll be careful because she can take a redshirt year. She hasn't taken it. But she's really not somebody that wants to go to college for 5 years. She'd like to get it done, and this is going to be a very good team. Samantha Logic may be as good a player as yours in the Big Ten. Morgan Johnson is going to be the best center in the Big Ten. If Jamie Prenti plays, now you got maybe the best shooter.
Yeah.
So they've finished in the top three of the Big Ten 4 years in a row. Been to the NCAA tournament all 4 years, and yet I would say this team has a chance to be as good as any of them.
Good.
Good.
Is Sam Logic dominating the GTL right now?
Well, her first game, a young freshman last year from UNI named Charnay Lamar from Des Moines East, got right up in her grill at 50 feet on in and bothered her. She had a little trouble handling it, and she had very average statistics. Last game, at halftime, she had a triple-double. She had one more assist. So Samantha's really coming on, and I think as she gets more and more comfortable playing the point guard, which is where she'll play with Camille Walline gone, I think she has a chance to dominate. I've heard people say she'll average a triple-double. Well, that ain't going to happen.
Oh, no.
But she will have several triple-doubles.
Yeah.
And remember, Cash Alexander had 2 in 1 year, and that was the high in the nation. 2 triple-doubles in 1 year. And Samantha Logic, I think, will do it a half dozen times this year. She's just so versatile, so unselfish, and she's developing her shooting. So we needed a high-energy player to take Cash's spot, and Sam is it.
That's great. Now,
Good.
you've got a lot of high school and former area high school players on your Game Time League teams. You
We
want
do,
to talk
and
a
it's
little bit
so-
about some of them?
You know, we lost the UNI men this year in prime time because of
Yeah.
a new rule that has them deciding they didn't want to take the time to do it because they can practice 4 times a week at home now. But UNI women are here, and I want to tip my cap to them. I don't think people understand what Tanya Warren has done. She replaced a very good coach. She needs had some good years. But the last 3 years at UNI, they've had a better one-loss record than any 3-year period in UNI history.
Wow.
So she's gotten the job done, and this will be her best year. Her best player, Jackie Kalin, is still recuperating, so she's not playing. Another possible starter, Mercedes Morgan, is hurting. She's not playing. But they've got 14 players down here playing. They've got a great recruiting class, including one of the 2 women that won Player of the Year in Iowa High School, which is Jessie Pauley. And they've got great big people, great scorers, people like Brittany Donaldson, Brooke Brown, Alyssa Davidson are great shooters, Stephanie Davidson, I should say, and they've got 2 great point guards, Jackie Kalin and this Charnay Lamar. 4 good post players that all have started some in their career or can start. And so I think UNI is a great addition to the league and really creates not just quality depth, but I went to that Iowa UNI game up at UNI last year, the women, and it was a 2-point game.
Yep.
So they are Iowa's equal up there, and I think that it's just so fun to see them mesh as teammates.
That was a heck of a
While
game.
knowing in the back of their minds, gosh, we want to beat UNI, or UNI says, gosh, we want to beat Iowa. So that rivalry and friendship as their teammates, that's really fun to see at the Game Time League. So
Now,
that's a
they can
special
come
part.
down and the men can't come down?
Well, the men just decided not to come down. Ben Jacobson, they're doing 4 half-hour practices a week. They get 2
okay.
hours a week now, new rule this year. And they decided to break their 2 hours up into half-hour segments. And they sandwich it around an hour and a half of manager-run workouts,
okay.
which are the same as practices. And they just felt like taking 7 hours out to drive down with a van and bring everybody down and sit and watch 2 games
Yeah.
was just a time commitment that they were going to skip this year and then evaluate and see how it goes. And I'm sure not smart enough to second-guess Ben Jacobson, one of the nation's top coaches, but it would not surprise me if he comes back down next year. We'll see.
I think you're smart enough to second guess him.
He has my everlasting respect. What they've done with players, I get heat sometimes for saying that they take players that aren't as good as Iowa players. The fact of the matter is, you almost never get a player at UNI that people in the Big Ten are offering. You almost never do. And so they take players that are great players that are overlooked or underappreciated, and they turn them into a team that over the last 13 years is 500 with Iowa and 500 with Iowa State and has beaten Drake. So they've been as good a program as we have been since Dr. Tom left.
Yeah.
And they're doing it with players that aren't as heralded. Well, there's only one answer to that. That's coaching.
Coaching.
Yeah.
Well, more power to him. Now, let's get back to the men for a second. We've got a lot of new incoming Hawkeye freshmen-to-be basketball players. You've seen them all. Well, you haven't seen the kid from Indiana.
Yeah, Indianapolis.
But I thought I'd ask you a little bit about, let's start
Patrick
with,
Ingram was a young man from Indianapolis. He had a class he had to take this summer and some All-Star game. He has played the Indiana-Kentucky All-Star game, which tells you all you need to know about how good he is. So we have not seen him. But I'll tell you, no one's ever going to forget Mike Giselle when he's done with his Hawkeye career. He is an immediate starter at point guard, in my opinion. He solves 2 positions because now you get to play Devin Marble at 3, which not only is a better position for Devin, but a position where we don't really have anybody. We're going to have Eric May trying to play there. We're going to have people like Aaron White and Zach McCabe trying to play different positions. But for Marble to be a great 3 and for Mike Giselle to be a great 1 solves both those positions. And Mike Giselle is unique, much like Matt Gatens. Great shooter. Great scorer. He's got the in-between jump shot. He go all the way to the hoop. He's a great 3-point shooter. His very first game in primetime, he goes 5 for 6 on threes. Unselfish passer. In that same game, he had 10 assists. And plays,
big is he?
plays the defensive end. You know, it's funny. You look at him and think, oh, it's Troy Skinner. Red-haired kid, you know, kind of a crew cut. He's about 6'3".
Yeah.
He's a good athlete. He can dunk the ball easily, but he's just so smart, is what I love about him, and I know why Fran McCaffrey is so excited to get him.
Everything you wanted him to say.
He can play both guards because he's a great shooter, but he's instinctively a point guard, which is so hard to find. And so I know that Fran was just tickled when we got that commitment. Adam Woodbury got the great publicity because when North Carolina goes after you hard,
Right.
when you're named the #1 player in the nation at a camp of the top 100 players in the nation, you deserve those plaudits. And he's shown me that he's going to be a great player, but Mike Giselle's much farther along.
Yes.
Yeah.
how about Anthony Clemens?
Well, Anthony is right now a Big Ten level defensive player. But much like Kyle Meyer's there defensively too, I think, but they're just not as developed offensively. Kyle Meyer's a great shooter, but there's going to be nights like the other night he went 0 for 8. The night before that he had 18 points. So they're going to be inconsistent, those two on offense. But Kyle Meyer blocked a bunch of nice shots. He's the 6'10" kid from Alpharetta, Georgia.
And he moves, doesn't he? Really get up and
He
down
can
the
run up
floor?
and down a little bit, although he's kind of a heavy-legged kid. He's not a skinny kid. He's a big, solid kid. But Anthony Clemens can stay in front of everybody, and we didn't have anybody like that.
No.
You know, if Mike Giselle is out of the game, who's going to go out there? And can you put Anthony and Mike out there together and play tough man-to-man with 2 good quick guards, and then let maybe Marble be the 3rd good defensive player, or Eric May, a great defensive player? I think there's going to be times when the Hawks have to play a particular defense because they've decided we're going to play Basabe, Woodbury, McCabe, White, Olaseni. We're going to play those 5 big guys, and we got to have 3 of them on the court at once, and they can play some zone traps and some zone and do that. But if they're playing man-to-man, and the other team's got an active 4 and a 6-5-3, then those lineups can't play man-to-man, and so you got to have some more perimeter defensive help, and now he's got it. And I know one of the things he's excited about is now at every position, he's got athletes
Yeah.
that are not flawed as players, guys that he could actually say, okay, I'm going to put him out there, and he can play. That competition, to go 12 deep with competition and athleticism, that makes you better.
It's been a long time since we've had this level of talent on the Hawkeye roster.
Look back to what happened to the transfers.
Yeah.
When Anthony Tucker transferred, he was probably our best player. He just barely starts for Division II team now. When Tony
He's
Freeman
gone from there?
Yeah, when Tony
dropped out
Freeman
of there?
transferred, he went to Southern Illinois. He could only play half-time. He was our best player. When Jake Kelly left, he went to Indiana State and got beat out by a freshman. When Jeff Peterson left, he was a starter, one of our best players. He goes to Arkansas and can't even start.
Transfers from there, did
So when your best players go to lesser programs and can't even start, you know you didn't have enough talent.
Yeah.
So he had a long ways to go, Coach McCaffrey did, in upgrading that talent. And he had to do it without being able to sell, come join our team, you'll be in the NCAA tournament. He had to sell hope. He had to sell, we'll get better fast and you'll get some playing time. And he's done it.
Well, we can match up against anybody with these athletes. The versatility
Now we can.
in those matchups with this talent is going to be pretty incredible.
And
I mean, all those
remember-
kids can play 2 or 3 spots, really.
And remember, it isn't just Licklider and Alford that suffered from inability to get the top talent. Coach Davis's last year,
And a few other things.
he made it to the Sweet 16.
Yeah.
He came within a basket of beating the #1 team in the country, UConn, down in Arizona.
Yeah.
I went, knowing it was his last game. And he had 4 guys in the top 9 that were not offered college scholarships. Not offered college scholarships other than Iowa.
That's
Jake
coaching.
Jakes, Jason Price, Kent McCausland, Jason Smith. And those guys played the #1 team in the country off their feet. So it has been the ability of Coach McCaffrey to not only coach the kind of way Tom Davis did, with accountability and up-tempo and taking advantage of what your players can do, play it together, but now he's doing it with top 100 kids, which Coach had a few of, Coach Davis, but not near as many as we have now.
Who came, when you came to Iowa? Who was
Joe.
our coach?
George Raveling,
Okay.
yep.
86, 87 season.
George Raveling, we used to have that Shirts and Skins game at the arena before football games. And I would play in it because they wanted to make sure it wasn't all Iowa players so they didn't run afoul of any NCAA rules. And I remember once George Raveling puts his arm around me and there's 12,000 people watching the scrimmage. That was the level of hysteria at that point. Watching the scrimmage for free before a football game. He puts his arm around me and says, "Ain't this something?" And he's been quoted as saying, "I never should have left Iowa." He's had a nice career after this, went to USC, and I'll always believe that if it would have been a more comfortable place for a 45-year-old single black man to live, he'd have stayed forever, and he's always regretted leaving in terms of his career opportunities.
I was with him the night he left.
Is that right?
Yeah, Bumps, we at the athletic club, my wife and I, Bump called us, and George Raveling and Bump Elliott, I think that was it. And I'll tell you the story because it's all true. And we had a wonderful conversation, but that's his last day of work at Iowa. And Bump walked him to the car. You thought they'd be shaking hands, but they did. They hugged.
Oh.
And George went his way, and Bump walked back. So
Yeah.
it was I thought that George Raveling was one of the nicest guys that you should sit down and eat with that ever walked the streets in Iowa.
Natural storyteller.
Yes.
Yeah.
Everything
Warm
about
fella, warm guy.
And the most interesting thing about George Raveling, when the coach he worked with, his dad donated a lot of money to the addition to Carver Hawkeye Arena.
Scott Howard.
Scott Howard.
Oh, yeah.
He came up and talked to me, and I said, "Does George?" And he said, "Yes, he does." And does he have the yellow speech that he gave
For Martin Luther King.
Martin Luther King? And he said, "Yes, he does." And I said, "How much is that thing worth?" And he said, billions of dollars.
Well, it's priceless.
Well, when I first got here, Lute Olson
Yeah.
was the coach, and 5 or 6 of the guys on that team were at my house playing poker one night when they got a call that said, "Come over to the arena," and Mark Gannon stood up and said, "Lute's quitting."
yeah.
Yeah.
He didn't know. He just predicted it. And, we're going to occasionally lose people from Iowa to go to other situations, but we've been pretty blessed when you look back at the history of Lute Olson, George Raveling, Tom Davis.
yes.
We've had the opportunity to be coached by some great people.
Davis inherited quite a bit of talent.
Thanks to George.
Incredible.
Yeah,
Incredible
George should
talent.
recruit him.
But you know what? Most of that talent was there the year before, too.
Yeah.
That's right.
And they had the kind of year that caused a coach to leave. So you got to give most of the credit for what they became to Tom Davis. Tom Davis took
yeah.
people
Oh, yeah.
I know.
like Brad Lohaus, who was not even going to come back out for basketball
No.
because he hadn't been a starter. He hadn't hardly even got to play. Kevin Gamble, Ed Horton, he found a way to put them in positions where they could succeed.
Yes.
And that's the essence of coaching, I think.
Now, we're talking about old coaches. Have you stayed in touch or heard from Steve Alford?
Just occasionally. I have a lot of respect for Steve. I think in a lot of ways he's a very good coach now. I think he got a great advantage from assistant coach that came and joined him, and I think they're having the time of their lives down there. They're doing
Good.
very well. They're winning an awful lot of games.
Good.
Steve got an unfair rap. I can say for certain that about 2/3 of things.
Damn right.
2/3 of things I hear people say, Steve did this, Steve did that. Never happened.
Never happened.
We've
People
talked
were
to
jealous
people
of
that
him.
were named in these so-called stories.
Yeah.
Never happened.
He was a great competitor, but when you think about it, he was coached by his father and Bobby Knight all his life.
Yeah.
Then he goes and he becomes a head coach, his very first job at McAllister College. He never gets to learn from any other coaches. He never played for anyone that played in his own. He never learned any other kinds of systems. He never learned any way to deal with people other than Bobby Knight's way of dealing with people, which I don't think is an effective way of dealing with people that Bobby Knight made work just by force of personality. And so Steve had to kind of relearn things in the height of a highly scrutinized coaching career. So
And
you'll never.
You can argue with those people, but they don't believe it. They believe that everything he did was bad.
Well, you never meet a guy that's more honest and
That's right.
family-loving and religious and faithful and loyal than
I'm glad to
Steve.
hear you say it.
And he had a great sense of humor. It was kind of that David Letterman humor, kind of poking fun at you and so forth. But he was the kind of guy that I think people can always depend on. And that's a trait I value greatly, and Steve had in
I
spades.
agree with you.
And he's had a lot of success at New Mexico.
Well, Craig, his assistant coach is
Neil.
Craig Neal.
Craig Neal, yeah.
Is a great coach in his own right, and I give Steve a lot of credit for letting Craig come in and do a lot of things. He is similar to what Coach Bergman did for me at West High. Craig Neal got to make a lot of decisions, got to have a lot of input, and I know for a fact that I kept waiting for Steve Alford at some point to say, "Get a little big for your britches here, Craig. I'm the boss here." Never once.
Yeah.
Never once did he say anything like that, and I'm pretty sure. And instead, he would always say, "You're right. I'm wrong, and you're right, and I'm going to do it differently."
Do you,
And not very many guys can do that.
Yeah.
do you play much golf with Bergman?
Well, I do. I thought you were going to say with Coach Alford. And I'll tell you what, Coach Alford was an excellent golfer.
Yeah.
Craig Neal's a little better.
Yeah.
And Craig Neal would never stop reminding Steve of how he beat him on the golf course. And that doesn't set well. And yet, what a great
bet
friendship.
not.
What a great
What
friendship.
about his oldest son?
Well, they both have gotten college scholarships. Steve's son and Craig Neal's son have both gotten. I think one of them's going to stay and play for Steve there,
Yeah.
and the other one's going, I think, to Washington State or something like that, or
Oh, really?
San Diego State maybe. So they both ended up being high Division I players.
Two of his
You know-
best players, young
Yep,
players.
both the same age.
I was surprised that Davis coached at Stanford. I didn't realize that.
Well, he just told me the story this year. We're talking about being on the golf course, and I try not to bug him about golf story or basketball stories all the time. But when he was at Lafayette,
Yes.
he got the job, and they said, for the first time ever, Lafayette's going to have an assistant coach. And he says, we're good. He says, I'm going to ask a guy named Gary Williams. And I said, well, Gary Williams was a student manager, student coach at Maryland with Tom. And they said, but he's got to be the head soccer coach. So Tom goes to Gary Williams, who's now a Hall of Fame coach, and says, Gary, I'd like you to come with me, but you got to coach soccer. And he says, I never seen a soccer game. I can't coach soccer. So it was that close to Gary Williams never getting started in basketball maybe. He comes in the office 2 days later and says, I bought a book. I'm your basketball assistant and your soccer head coach. So Tom spent 7 years there, I think, at Lafayette. Does a great job.
Yeah.
Boston College
Yep.
took a pay cut. $23,000 a year to go to Boston College. Now we think of Boston College being the big time.
Yeah.
Back then, you had to take a pay cut to go from Lafayette to Boston College. So
Well, he
you talk
made-
about a guy that paid his dues.
Yeah, he made his name out.
And he built that program to nothing. Then he goes to Stanford, where everybody said, oh, you can't win at Stanford. You can't recruit the kinds of players that could get into school and be any good at Stanford. And he turns them around.
Yeah.
So we were damn lucky to get Tom Davis.
Yeah.
Well, now,
Why would he leave Stanford and come to Iowa?
Well, Iowa paid a lot better, and he was actually looking to leave Stanford for a variety of reasons, but he was a Midwest guy, and he was interviewing for Houston, and Bump went down and stole him right underneath Houston's noses, and he wanted to get back here. He had family in Wisconsin that has since passed away, his mother, and, you know, people don't know this in his 13 years, but his mother was bedridden, an invalid, for much of that time.
never knew that.
Just about every weekend. He'd go up there and sit with her.
Wow.
So when you talk about human values and being dependable and somebody that's a quality guy, you can put him at the top of the list.
We've been visiting with Randy Larson, the
I didn't know
commissioner of the Men's Basketball Primetime League here in Iowa City, actually in North Liberty, Iowa, as well as the Women's Basketball Game Time League. We've just got a couple minutes left. One of the things we haven't talked about is one of Randy's other jobs. He's a lawyer. He's the commissioner of the Primetime League and the Game Time League. He's also the head basketball coach at Iowa City Regina for the boys basketball team.
Now, I thought we were going to talk about Monica's and Bob's.
Well,
Rock, that's why I came on this crazy show.
Haven't even talked
You
about
guys all
that.
come in there all the time.
He's a
I'm just kidding.
restaurateur.
Restaurateur.
The restaurants are great fun, and to tell you the truth,
How do you do it all?
We suffered in the recession, and I'm just digging out of a pretty big hole. We lost $600,000 in 3 years,
Jeez.
and now we're making it back thanks to the great customers we've had. But to all those people out there I owe money to, you know, we're working on it. But you talk about labor of love, Regina basketball. Here you're surrounded by people that are at a high school where 2 years in a row, every single senior went to college or into the military. Every single one. So when you're a parent in Iowa City, you can ask yourself, do I want to go to a very, very good public school where 75 or 80% are going to college? Or do I want to go have my kids sit in a classroom where 100% are going to college?
100%.
And he can do everything.
Yeah.
He or she can do everything. All of our basketball players play football but one. Out of 15, all but one. Most of them play baseball. The rest of them play soccer. Almost all of them go out for track. You get to do everything. You get to write for the yearbook. You get to be in a glee club. You get to be in the plays. You go to mass. All the things that make you well-rounded, you can find there. And on my basketball team, I sometimes get frustrated because I got guys come out for basketball that haven't touched a basketball since the last season ended in March. And then I say, the boy's a nice kid, and he's playing 4 sports, and he's playing as hard as you can play. We'll just have to get better shots.
Yeah.
And then this year, we had a group of guys that shot the ball so beautifully that I can't make that joke anymore because we set all kinds of records for 3 points made in a game. We made 10 threes one time in the first half. So we had a senior-dominated team this year that really took it to heart and became a good team. We've won 16 or 17 3 years in a row out of a 21-game regular season. So we turned the corner. They haven't won a conference basketball championship in 24 years. So basketball's been a struggle to get turned around, and we're just tickled pink at the effort guys have made. We're going to take our lumps this year because we're really rebuilding after losing 10 seniors. But I love the kids at Regina and love doing it.
1 minute.
So it's official. You'll be back.
Well, the school board meets every month. But if they'll have me, I'll be back, that's for
What
sure.
do you think of the new league? 13 teams. I
It's a
think
disservice
that's
to the students.
That's right.
We have a 2-hour drive 4 times a year we'd have to make. So I'm hoping that they'll find some other solution that allows us to not play those far-flung teams
gonna have
sometimes.
to-
But thank you so much for having
Randy,
me on.
thanks for being here. We've been visiting with Randy Larson, the commissioner of the Primetime League and the Game Time League, head basketball coach for the boys team at Regina, a lawyer, a restaurateur, and our friend. We appreciate you being here.
And great
on behalf
storyteller.
of on behalf of Bob and Bud and Earl and myself, we'd like to thank you for tuning in every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. on Channel 18, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. That's it. Thanks for watching. We just lost our picture.
We'll see ya.